Ego and Archetype, Part 23. So we just finished with Thomas Aquinas, the quote, the zodiac, the sum of archetypal images in the mind of God. Dream number 12. I have been set a task nearly too difficult for me. A log of hard and heavy wood lies covered in the forest. I must uncover it, saw or hew from it a circular piece, and then carve through the piece a design. The result is to be preserved at all cost, as representing something no longer recurring and in danger of being lost. At the same time, a tape recording is to be made describing in detail what it is, what it represents, its whole meaning. At the end, the thing itself and the tape are to be given to the public library. Someone says that only the library will know how to prevent the tape from deteriorating within 5 years. He's got a little image of I think it's the tape. End of quote. Again, we have the theme of the difficult assigned task, analogous to the alchemical opus. The covered log is the hidden original material, which first must be uncovered or made manifest and then given a special form which has some uniqueness, since it will not recur again. The carved design is a fivefold image. The number 5 occurs again in the remark that there is danger or deterioration in 5 years. The symbolism of 5 comes up in the quintessence of the alchemists. It is the fifth form and ultimate unity of the 4 elements, and hence the final goal of the process. Ruland says the quintessence is the medicine itself, and the quality of substances separated by the art from the body. Jung says that the number 5 suggests the predominance of the physical man. This would correspond to the fact that the dream image reminds one of an abstract human figure with 5 protuberances, 4 limbs and head. Hence, it would suggest the goal and completion of physical existence. The deposit of the object and a tape recording of its meaning in the public library raises some very interesting points. In some respects, the object and the tape recording can be considered as synonymous, since the sketch of the object looks much like a reel of recording tape. It's got the image there, I'll try to put it up. By this line of associations, the task can be seen as the transformation of wood into word, i.e. matter into spirit. It is possible that this dream was foreshadowing the fact that I would publish a series of his dreams in the future. It is possible that this dream was foreshadowing the fact that I would publish a series of his dreams in the future. The task would then be the recording of his dreams, which he deposited with me. However, especially in the context of the other dreams, this simple personalistic interpretation is completely inadequate to the data. Much more likely is the assumption that the dream task refers to his psychological life task, the results of which are to be deposited as a permanent increment to a collective or transpersonal library, i.e., a word or spirit treasury. The motive of the treasure house is found in alchemy as a synonym for the philosopher's stone. The fifth parable of Aurora Consurgence is entitled "Of the Treasure House, which wisdom built upon a rock." Alphidius says, "This is the treasure house in which are treasured up all the sublime things of science or wisdom, or the glorious things which cannot be possessed." In Alphidius, the treasure house is a fourfold structure and thus clearly a symbol of the self. A similar treasury image occurs in Catholic theology concerning the treasure of merits accumulated by Christ and the saints. In spite of the concretistic misuse of this image by the Church to justify the sale of indulgences, it is an archetypal idea which expresses some aspect of the objective psyche. In the example cited, the treasury, when found, will convey benefits to the finder. In our dream, however, the dreamer is not making a withdrawal for his own use, but rather a deposit which will augment the public treasury. We recall the words of Jesus, quote, "Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve." Matthew 20. The dream seems to imply that the psychological accomplishments of the individual leave some permanent spiritual residue that augments the cumulative collective treasury, a sort of positive collective karma. In that case, the words of Milton concerning a good book could apply equally to the fruits of the inner psychological task of individuation. A permanent spiritual deposit is left, which is the precious lifeblood of a master spirit, embalmed and treasured up on purpose to a life beyond life. End of quote. The dream mentions the need to prevent deterioration. Some preservative or embalming process is required. Dream 10 brought up the same theme in the mummification of the amputated hands. Perhaps the significance of these references corresponds to the archetypal symbolism that lay behind the elaborate embalming procedures of ancient Egypt. This idea seems provocative, although I cannot pursue it further at present. Dream 13. I was looking at a curiously unique and beautiful garden. It was a large square with a floor of stone. At intervals of about 2 feet were placed brass objects standing upright and looking very much like Brancusi's bird in space. I stayed a long time. It had a very positive meaning, but what that was I was unable to grasp. Positive meaning, but what that was I was unable to grasp. That's hard to read. End of quote. Brancusi's bird in space is a graceful, slightly curved vertical pole of polished metal, thicker in its mid-region and tapering to a point at the top. It brings up the whole question of the symbolism of the pole or pillar. In simplest terms, it represents the phallic, striving, vertical thrust towards the upper spirit realm. It may signify the access mundi, which is the connection between the human world and the transpersonal divine world. On such a cosmic pole, the gods descend to manifest themselves, or the primitive shaman ascends to seek his ecstatic vision. An Egyptian religious ritual gives us some other symbolic implications of a vertical pole or pillar. In the rites which celebrated the death and resurrection of Osiris, the ceremonies culminated when the chief priest set the so-called Diged column upright. R.T. Rundle Clark says about this column, quote, the idea of the Diged or Diad column is that it stands firmly upright. For to be upright is to be alive, to have overcome the inert forces of death and decay. When the Diged, or Diad, I'm probably saying it wrong, is upright, it implies that life will go on in the world. End of quote. The Pistis Sophia speaks of a treasury of light in which are gathered the particles of light that have been redeemed for their imprisonment in the darkness of matter. The treasury is a kind of intermediate collecting station which then transmits the accumulated light to a higher region, the world of light, by means of a light stream called the Pillar of Glory. According to Manichaean doctrine, the elect perform this redemptive function for the scattered light. Having been reborn through gnosis, the elect become instruments for the gathering and concentration of light particles dispersed in matter. At the time of death, each carries his accumulated bundle of light out of the material world and into the eternal realm of light. Brancusi's sculpture plunging skyward might be compared with the Pillar of Glory, through which the collected particles of redeemed light stream into the eternal realm. A similar image occurs in Manichaean eschatology. At the end of time, the last statue or pillar appears. Quote, all the light that can still be saved is united in the great idea, in the form of the last statue, which raises up to heaven, while the damned and the demons, matter with its lust and bisexuality, are cast into a pit sealed over with an immense stone. End of quote. Jung refers to the Manichaean statue and relates it to an alchemical text. He writes, it is clear that the statue or pillar is either the perfect primordial man, or at least his body, both at the beginning of creation and at the end of time. End of quote. The dream image, which combines a stone square with poles, has a parallel in ancient Semitic sanctuaries as described by Fraser. He writes, we know that at all the old Canaanite sanctuaries, including the sanctuaries of Jehovah, down to the reformations of Hezekiah and Josiah, the two regular objects of worship were a sacred stock and a sacred stone, and that these sanctuaries were the seats of profligate rites performed by sacred men, Kidshin, and sacred women, Kidishoth. End of quote. Jeremiah refers to the sacred stock and stone when he criticizes the Israelites for saying to a stock, thou art my father, and to a stone, thou hast brought me forth, Jeremiah 2. Stone and pole are therefore representations of the feminine and masculine deities respectively. In psychological terms, the dream is thus presenting a conjunctio of the masculine and feminine principles. Why there should be a multiplicity of masculine poles contained within one stone square, I do not know. Why there should be a multiplicity of masculine poles contained within one stone square, I do not know. Perhaps it has similar implications to the multiplicity of pearls in the necklace of Sophia. However, an expression of totality and the union of opposites. However, as an expression of totality and the union of opposites, it is an image of completion. This dream is one of the last I have of this patient. 3 months later, he died. This dream series demonstrates, I think, that the unconscious under certain circumstances brings up considerations which properly can be called metaphysical. Although the dreamer did not undergo the process of individuation in the usual sense of that term, it can be surmised that the pressure of impending death may have telescoped that process. Certainly, these dreams suggest an urgency on the part of the unconscious to convey awareness of a metaphysical reality, as if such an awareness were important to have before one's physical death. The question will be asked, what effect did these dreams have on the dreamer? This is difficult to answer with certainty. Practically all of the dreams reported here had an intense emotional impact on the dreamer. But interestingly, he experienced this impact only when recounting the dreams in the analytic session, not beforehand. Somehow the presence of the analyst was needed to release the numinosity of the dream images. Taken as a whole, the dreams conveyed a series of small religious experiences which brought about a gradual and definite change in the dreamer's life attitude. The unreligious, unphilosophical man was given a metaphysical initiation. Metaphysical initiation. As a result, he was at least partially released from preoccupation with personal frustrations, and his personality acquired a new level of depth and dignity. After being brought back from near death, he voiced the question several times, "Why is my life prolonged?" Perhaps these dreams contain the answer. That's the end of chapter 8.